Welcome to Biz Africa. I'm Penina Karibe. A bloc of over 50 African states have raised sharp opposition to an attempt by the International Civil Aviation Organization Assembly to address concerns about which countries would be exempt from complying with EU's emissions trading regional schemes. ICAO president mentioned that certain airlines will be exempted from ETS regional schemes based on routes rather than country. He also noted that others will be exempted based on a hard number of revenue ton kilometers that would be reduced each year after 2014. The move is likely to replace an earlier plan to exempt countries that account for less than 1% of global revenue ton kilometers. Ngobat Zoa Etundi, Cameroon's representative to ICAO, says that the bloc cannot agree to a text that does not include the 1% threshold because it is necessary to protect Africa's burgeoning airline industry. Let us now dig deeper into this turn of events. We're joined live by Melanie Ralph. She is in London. Melanie, good to see you. So what are the remaining key issues over airline emissions and what resolutions can we see in the recent meetings?
Yeah, well, delegates from around the world are convening on Montreal for the UN's International Civil Aviation meeting. The aim of the game is to agree on how to limit growing carbon emissions. As you can imagine, there's a lot of ground to cover and many have their own agenda. The only existing regional scheme in place at the moment is in the EU, and that's the Emissions Trading Scheme, also known as the ETS. That also applies to foreign carriers. They've already compromised over where this reaches, that it should only apply to sovereign airspace rather than entire routes. But there's still resistance to this by large countries like India, China and African countries. They don't want the ETS to apply to foreign airlines, with some arguing that it could violate the Chicago Convention that ensures fairness for the global aviation sector.
So, Melanie, what effects could we see on business and trade in Africa if an agreement isn't reached on emissions?
Well, this is the big question. Some reports suggest that under EU law, both foreign and European airlines are required to buy carbon permits to cover their emissions in certain circumstances. This could of course lead to a trade war. Which countries will be exempt from regional schemes is what African countries are concerned about. The key element, as you were saying, for Africa is that they're digging their heels in over is whether exemptions to regional emission schemes will be based on routes rather than country. Those countries who account for less than 1% of so-called revenue ton kilometres, meaning the amount of goods transported, used to get an exemption. And that's what African countries want to keep to protect their growing airline industry.
All right, Melanie, thanks very much for those insights. Melanie Ralph, live in London. Now, Nigeria, Africa's #1 oil producer and most populous country, has long battled with corruption and political strife, but it is now poised to become a dominant economic force. The country is fast becoming a leading investment destination in Africa, so much so that the West African country poses a threat to South Africa's status as the biggest economy on the continent. CCTV's Sumitra Naidu with the story.
South Africa has long dominated the position as the most attractive investment destination in Africa, but this looks set to change. Nigeria is Africa's second biggest market after South Africa. With a growth rate of between 6 and 7% per year, the West African economy may soon lead the continent. The latest Rand Merchant Bank Where to Invest in Africa report is predicting that Nigeria may take the #1 position in the next 2 to 4 years.
Nigeria is currently rebasing their GDP numbers, and that is why we can see the market size growing over the next 2 years and overtaking South Africa.
Nigeria's GDP now stands at just over $268 billion. A recalculation of its GDP will bring it within striking distance of South Africa's GDP, which is at $384 billion.
What Nigeria is doing is growing much faster than South Africa. We must remember South Africa is much more exposed to what is happening globally. We can see that our supply side and growth is stagnating.
The report also found that Nigerian policy and legislation has become more investor-friendly. The country is moving up the ranks for ease of doing business. While South Africa still tops the list, it is not serving up attractive growth rates.
South Africa still has one of the best business environments in Africa, so that is standing them in good stead, and still we have the biggest market. We have a market size of $608 billion in South Africa, so that keeps us at the #1 ranking.
But Nigeria's impressive growth rates, largely driven by its capital-intensive oil industry, has not translated into reducing poverty or the unemployment rate of 24%. There are also concerns that its economy lacks structural change and diversification. Sumitra Nadu, CCTV, Johannesburg.
South Africa faces slow growth, widespread unemployment and a high reliance on foreign capital inflows. The weak global economic outlook is not helping. The IMF, however, says that with planned structural reforms, Africa's largest economy should boost growth and create jobs for its growing population. CCTV's Jitu Abraham with the story.
Analysts say South Africa's economy is already suffering from slow growth and high unemployment, further weighed down by weak growth in its main global trading partners, Europe and the U.S. The IMF projects growth to slow further to 2% in 2013. This is from 2.5% in 2012. This is reflective of global factors as well as a softer private consumption growth and sluggish private investment. South Africa's growth should pick up 3 to 3.5% in the coming years as global economy recovers and the government's infrastructure drive is realized.
Actually, a lot of jobs have been created in the South African economy. If you take the most recent data, between March and June of this year, 100,000 jobs were created, but 200,000 people entered the labor force. That's the reason why unemployment is still high.
In a review of Africa's largest economy, the IMF forecasts that continuing with planned structural reforms will both grow and create jobs for the growing population.
Let me give you some numbers. Amongst the people who have education below grade 12, unemployment is over 30%. But for graduates, it's about 5%. So skills and education really make a huge difference.
The education goal still remains the focus of those looking for long-term economic growth solutions for the country, making sure students are given the education and skill training currently in demand.
The bulk of government spending goes into education, health, social assistance. More than half of South African households now receive social assistance from the government. Another important part, about a third, goes to paying public employees, people like firemen, nurses and teachers.
Workers are currently striking at the Anglo-American Platinum, the world's top platinum producer, in protest of job cuts. A strike last week in the auto parts sector, making it difficult for automakers to build cars, is still going on. G2 Abraham, CCTV.
The black economic empowerment will remain a key economic policy in South Africa, but the practice of fronting it will not be condoned. The country's President Jacob Zuma told the National Summit in Midrand that fronting would be unforgivable as it distorts the country's empowerment picture, giving an impression of progress while there was none. Delegates to the country's first B Summit heard that an amended Black Economic Empowerment Act will come into law before the next general election in 2014. It is aimed at a wider audience and at criminalizing fronting, the practice of pretending to be a black-owned business to win government tenders.
Fronting is unforgivable as it distorts our empowerment picture, giving an impression of progress where there is none. It is for this reason that we will work hard to prevent and eradicate this practice. While condemning fronting, we also need to heighten our emphasis on education and skills development, especially technical and managerial skills for emerging entrepreneurs, without entrenching the stereotype that black people need perpetual training.
Our CCTV's Sumitra Naidu joins us live from Johannesburg for deeper insights into these developments in the continent's largest economy. Sumitra, thank you for joining us. So, what's the feeling among South Africans in regards to that report? Do they agree with it? And is the government doing enough to retain the country's position as a favorable investment destination?
Yes, well, Penina, in terms of that RMB investment report, you know, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some analysts point out that South Africa is still an attractive destination. However, they also point out that there are a number of issues that's making investors nervous and keeping many of them at bay. And these were pointed out in the RMB Where to Invest report and by the IMF earlier this week. The IMF found that policy uncertainty, labor disruptions, and electricity supply concerns are key problems that are holding back investment and which has damaged growth and job creation in South Africa. We also saw the World Bank report on ease of doing business. South Africa moved up 2 places overall to 39 out of 185 countries, but it dropped 10 places just in the category of starting a business. And this is an area that's really important for job creation. Last month, we saw the World Economic Forum releasing its report on the most competitive country in sub-Saharan Africa, and South Africa slipped, losing the top spot to Mauritius. Government is under a lot of pressure to do more to improve all of these reports and really improve the situation and lift this weak economy.
Now, so Sumitra, South Africa is yet to come out of what is being described as a strike season. Some motor workers are still on strike. We're yet to hear resolution, you know, the strike at Amplat's Rustenburg mine. So is there going to be an end to all this?
Well, there's been no progress in either of the strikes. Car makers and dealerships and even panel beaters have been hard hit as workers in the component sector continue with their strike over wages. So even though workers in the motor manufacturing sector have gone back to work, they can't do much as there's no parts. BMW says it now has to pay up to 25% extra to import cars into South Africa. The car maker says it's extremely worried about its reputation as a reliable supplier. BMW South Africa only recently started supplying cars to China, but it's been unable to export properly since August. Data out yesterday showed export sales fell 75% in September, while overall domestic sales fell by 1.5% in volume terms. And in the mining sector, strike action at Amplatz continues. AMCU took the matter to court, trying to stop Amplatz from retrenching over 3,000 staff. The union is also accusing Amplatz of not following the correct procedures in terms of retrenchments. Judgment in that case has been reserved in the Labour Court until next week's. Talks, though, between the mining company and the unions continue. Interestingly, the labour strife also came up in the IMF report that came out this week. The report flagged escalating labour tensions as a key domestic risk and called for more flexibility in labour legislation. So lots to look at there. Penina?
Oh, wow. Quite a grim picture there indeed, Sumitra. Thanks very much for joining us. Sumitra Naidu, live in Johannesburg. Well, Biz Africa takes a short break coming up. The Togolese innovation whose inventor hopes will be used to build houses on planet Mars.
BizAsia. Asia means business.
Welcome back to Biz Africa. The economy is on top of the agenda as Zimbabwe's new government gets down to business. New Finance Minister Patrick Chinamasa is on a maiden trip to Washington for the annual World Bank meetings and is expected to woo the Bretton Woods institution that has shunned Zimbabwe over mounting arrears. CCTV's Farai Mwakutuya now with the story of the challenges that lie ahead for Zimbabwe's economy.
Please don't expect any comments from me.
The man in charge of Zimbabwe's purse strings is keeping his cards close to his chest.
I will not comment on that until I have a full briefing, please.
He has refused to talk about his plans until he returns from Washington. Analysts believe his task is no walk in the park.
We're looking at 90% unemployment. How do we begin to get people to earn money so that they can spend money in the economy? That requires new investment.
Fresh capital has been hard to come by. Economic instability and a controversial indigenization policy keeping would-be financiers at bay. The result, Zimbabwe's growth in 2013 is projected to fall below the regional average of 5%. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel if the right policy mix is implemented. That mix, according to the World Bank, includes reforms to improve overall business conditions and a program of public investment to repair infrastructure and increase access to power, which could lead to stronger growth in the mining sector and favor the necessary investment in the agricultural and manufacturing sector. Right now, though, manufacturing is limping. A survey released by the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries on Wednesday puts capacity utilization at just 40%. Stakeholders are lobbying government to shield local manufacturers who have taken a beating from foreign players.
It has to be protected from other economies, for instance, the Turkey, South Africa, Brazil, and other SADC economies that want to get into Zimbabwe.
Government has identified 3 industrial clusters to spur growth. They are leather, clothing and textiles, and pharmaceuticals. The cluster's initiative is aimed at leveraging the country's core competencies.
We grow lots of crop, we mine a lot, and all this stuff is just exported out in raw material. If we actually add to it, value add to it, beneficiate it, we actually get more value out of the components.
Achieving that is dependent on government creating a conducive environment and the private sector and much sought after international investors responding accordingly. Farai Mwakutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
An inventor in Togo is hoping that the 3D printer he has designed will be the first to make it to Mars. Afate Neku's printer lifts designs of a computer and reproduces physical objects. He has put months of work into making the experimental device and hopes that it can one day be used to help construct houses on planet Mars. Neku shows off the 3D printer by printing a simple round container, which soon begins to take shape as the device gets to work. In a country where technology is viewed as lagging behind other parts of the world, this is a significant achievement. Afate has named the printer Wafate, a contraption of his own first name.
I want my 3D printer to be the first on Mars, and it will be known around the world that someone from Africa imagined and designed the robot which is building houses on Mars. My dream is to revive the hope of the youth, ensure that Africa also can have its voice on the global stage as far as technology is concerned. We can also create things. Africa has always lagged behind when it comes to technology. We are always behind. I definitely think our continent must rise up. We cannot expect Africa to overtake the West unless we start doing little things like this.
Let's have a look now at how those markets that we track for you here on Biz Africa ended the day this Thursday. A splash of green right across all 4 major bourses. The Nigeria All-Share Index earning almost 1% in the green. The JSE All-Share Index in the green as well with 0.25%. The Nairobi Securities Exchange up by 1.5% and the EGX as well up by almost 1%. That's Biz Africa. Thanks for watching. Beatrice, take it up.